You are the only living soul I can tell my secret to.
I painted every single one of them. Every big eye. Me. And no one will ever know but you.
Hello, Chris here with Dan, and we're here to get Dan's thoughts on Big Eyes, which is Tim Burton's new movie.
Yes.
So, Dan, first maybe give us a bit of an overview of the story of this
it's
one.
actually not a story I was familiar with, though I imagine maybe people in America are more familiar. It's the story of Margaret Keane, who is an American popular artist. Although she wasn't famous when her work was famous, her husband, Walter Keane, took a lot of credit for the work. He took all credit for the work. He was the public face. He was the artistic genius behind these iconic images of mainly little girls that have huge eyes. They're slightly they are caricatured, and they're very kind of, some people found them very cloying images.
Yeah.
And the term that was used to refer to them were waifs.
Yeah, I guess if you didn't know her story or her name, you would kind of recognise the images.
Yeah, so these were incredibly popular in the 1960s. It sparked lots of debates about whether popular mass-produced art can be really considered high art or valuable art. And it's also it's the story of the rise to popularity of her work, but also the human drama of their marriage and this kind of weird twisted relationship they had.
Yeah. Interesting. So this is Tim Burton's first kind of serious film for quite a long time, isn't it, really?
And I think the obvious comparison to make is Ed Wood,
Yeah.
which is his other biopic. And when I spoke to Tim Burton, he described them as drunken narratives. And I think that's a good way of talking about them, because he's not going for exacting realism. And the tone is quite interesting in Big Eyes. It's one of the things I like, and it's also one of the things that's maybe slightly damaging to the movie. But We'll get onto that in a minute. So it's not going for exacting realism, and it's not trying to go for all of the historical facts. So it focuses more on maybe the themes and the topics at hand rather than actual life events.
And I guess his output recently has been silly, kind of something that's been quite childlike or aimed at children. Is it nice to see him going back to this kind of material?
Yeah, I think it is. He's been doing a lot of really big budget films like Alice, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So I think he's an interesting director. Also, I think it's a topic that he has a lot of interesting things to say about, being an artist and someone who is his artwork, his incredibly personal artwork. You know, the characters of Jack Skellington are mass produced now.
Yeah.
Like if you go into a Disney store, if you go to Camden in North London, you see Jack Skellington on backpacks, jeans, t-shirts, people with tattoos. This character that he created in a moment, I assume, of solitude is now everywhere. So it's very, there's a scene in the movie, it's one of my favourite scenes in the movie, where Margaret Keane, her husband, takes the decision to not sell her original artwork, but to sell prints. Her art suddenly becomes mass-produced. It becomes a work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, and it's everywhere. And I feel like Tim Burton is making maybe some reflection on his own craft there, which is probably where the film is most interesting.
And we've got two kind of powerhouse actors in the movie in the shape of Amy Adams and Christoph Waltz. So can you talk a little bit about their performances?
Yeah, so they play Margaret and Walter Keane respectively. Amy Adams, I think, is the finer performance, but it's also the less showy performance, because she is, she's the deferential wife. She's the one who goes along with this, because the work and the quality of the work doesn't change, but she isn't able to make a success of it. Walter says nobody buys lady art. But it's also because she can't tell the yarn behind the pictures. She can't sell them. And this is where Christoph Waltz comes in. And he's really good early on, when he's this charismatic, larger-than-life salesman, really. He talks the good talk.
Yeah.
He can sell this art. He can create a story why you might like it, why you might want to have it hanging in your house. And that's when he's really good. Later on, as the relationship progresses, the lies become more elaborate, he becomes this kind of fairy tale villain. And I think that's where the film kind of unravels a little bit, because he becomes so big, so larger than life. He's like the wolf knocking on the door of the Three Little Pigs in one scene, where it's just too big.
Yeah.
And I think, in those moments, the film wants to explore the drama of their twisted marriage, which, if you think about it, it's a terrible situation. It's a story of it's abuse, and he's suffocating his wife and enslaving her for his own ego. But it doesn't fit, because the rest of the movie has this really kind of buoyant, almost like farcical tone.
Yeah.
It's really like light in other areas, so it's kind of this mismatch.
Right, so tonally it's a little bit of a mess.
Yeah, because his characters, like Terence Stamp plays this art critic for a newspaper, and he's a caricature. Jason Schwartzman's character is a caricature, and then the scene at the end of the movie when this all kind of resolves could come from like a broad comedy.
Right.
So it's kind of weird. I don't feel like you can maintain this lightness of tone and then segue into like examining the dark elements of their marriage, and ultimately I don't think the film has much to say about their relationship.
And would you like to see more of that?
I think maybe just more conviction one way or the other. I think it tries to have that moment where it plumbs the depths, but because the rest of the tone is much lighter, it comes across as kind of just a little bit superficial.
Yeah. Well, it sounds intriguing. I mean, any more pros or cons?
I do think I like the tone. It's not like Big Fish where there's loads of surreal interludes, but there are some moments where Burton uses special effects to kind of portray the psychological state of Amy Adams in certain scenes. I think that's when it's particularly interesting. I do think Terence Stamp's character is very amusing, and the ending is really, really funny, but because it just feels like the stuff in the middle maybe comes from a different movie.
So is this good Tim Burton, bad Tim Burton, or somewhere in between?
I think it's minor Tim Burton.
Right.
It does also feels not very cinematic. It feels a little bit TV movie of the week.
Yeah.
And that sounds really, really harsh. There's much more to it than that. But it doesn't feel like full-on cinematic Tim Burton. It's a long way from Ed Wood.
Cool. All right. Well, moment of truth. What are you going to give it out of 10?
It's still a really good film with lots of good elements. So, seeing as it's a good film, I'm going to give it 7.0. Good.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Dan. And thank you guys for watching. And for all your movie reviews, keep it right here on IGN.